the sacred kingdom, and Zeus or Jupiter is the expander that's like, actually, I want to sleep with a bunch of women and bring more of this magic into our kingdom.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for staying. I'm here to share with you the beautiful transmissions from the walls of my cavernous heart and to witness the great frequency shift that we are moving into as a collective and the beautiful deep work that we are doing as we glide into the age of Aquarius. This is the Liminal Frequencies podcast. Let's go.
When I was about 6 years old, I remember hearing on the news that this woman, Susan Smith, drowned her two boys. And evidently she lied about it too. Evidently she was creating this whole drama about how they were going to come back and they needed to get the kidnapper. But I think it made an impression on me. And I remember at that age thinking, I'm not having kids. This is messed up. So, welcome to the show. My name is Jillian Ribbons. I am an Akashic guide, an acupuncturist. I work with osteopathic medicine and the metaphysics and sound journeying. And I'm here to help you shift your frequency, to help you get some more knowledge, understanding, insight, connection about some things that are strange that we're going through as we move from the third dimension to the fifth dimension. And today we're going to talk about, this powerful shift as we move from Pisces, Saturn in Pisces, to Saturn in Aries, and as we move from Jupiter in Gemini to Jupiter in Cancer. And the theme of all this movement is rebirthing all of the frequencies that we've been having online and all of the things we've been wanting to step into and ready to step into. This rebirth process that we've been mulling over as we go back in and out of the cocoon. And so now, we're more ready than ever, but these themes are really interesting. In this show, we're going to talk about the mythology of the birth of Artemis and Apollo, and we're going to talk about Saturn, which in Greek mythology was Kronos, and how he's devouring his children. I also need to mention this baby bonus that's been proposed by the current administration to encourage more American children to be born. And $5,000 if maybe in the 80s we would fall for that, but it's going to be interesting to see with Jupiter in Cancer, which often promotes things like baby boomers happening. And I live in a rural area where there are a lot of kids around. It would be really beautiful to be a parent in an area where you feel supported by community and there's yurts and there's plenty of fresh air to go outside. But whether you are thinking of having children or you are currently gestating yourself in your own rebirth process, this episode is for you. So let's get in your miniature DeLorean, get on your onesie, and we're going to travel back to ancient Greece. Welcome to the show. Today I want to talk to you about the long delayed process of Saturn moving into Aries. And it feels like the process of rebirthing and death has just been on some kind of interesting loop lately. I've noticed a lot of people, last time I mentioned on the episode that I was feeling a little under the weather, and I noticed that a lot of people were experiencing this resurgence of what I affectionately call is the upgrade. The actually viruses have been on this planet for hundreds of thousands of years, and about a tenth of our human genome actually comes from viruses. So without these bits of genetic information and material, we would not be evolving and becoming what we are. So I just noticed this need to go back into the womb, back into the cocoon, back into the rebirthing process. And we've had so many new beginnings, and it's such an opportunity for a new start. And that's what I'm hearing from astrologers as Saturn is moving into Aries. And of course, Saturn will be retrograding back into Pisces on September 1st until February 13th. So we're going to get a taste of that new energy. And for those of you feeling the energy of Saturn and Pisces, a lot of that to me felt like letting go and deep purging of old belief systems, ideas, thoughts. Of course, your own personal chart is important to consult when it comes to that. For me, it was the area of my life that affected death, taxes, intimacy, shared resources. And yeah, what really feels true for me is this new beginning in as Saturn moves into Aries, and a new opportunity for me to move into the shared resources and community of land that I've been calling in. And yeah, it's so exciting. So I want to start with the beginning. In the beginning, Mother Earth, she had nothing living on her. She wasn't even mother, she was just Earth. And because she was a mother to nobody. And she looked up into the sky and saw the cosmic sky god Uranus. And I almost didn't laugh. She looked up into the sky and Uranus became her lover, and they gave birth to the entire planet. And the first children of Uranus and the Mother Earth were the Cyclopses, and they were kind of horrible creatures. And Uranus didn't like them, and he sent them down into this dark pit, the darkest pit of the earth, called Tartarus. They were named Thunder, Lightning, and Thunderbolt. And after this happened, they gave birth to the Titans, and she was hoping that she would find somebody to take down Uranus so that he wouldn't continue to hurt her children, her creation. And that person ended up being Cronus, or Saturn in Greek. Saturn is Roman for Kronos. And she knew that she would depose her husband Uranus with a sickle. And she gave this sickle to her son, and it was going to be him that continued. And he actually castrated Uranus, which was another story that we get into in this show about how the froth that came up from the castration of Uranus as Saturn took Uranus down, so he will have no more children. Out of that was birthed Venus, Aphrodite, out of that sea foam. So we can see just an interesting theme of this beautiful divine feminine energy that comes into the planet as we get rid of this disempowered masculine energy. And we'll see how there actually is kind of a hierarchy in astrology of different planets. And so as we move forward into the story, Mother Earth, she makes Pontus, which is the boundless seas, her second husband. And from this springs beautiful gods of the waters and riches and abundance, water sprites and rivers and lakes, and all of the beauty of this paradise. Now, a lot of people believe that during this time of Cronus or Saturn, he was ruling over heaven on earth, and this was the golden age because there was a lot of peace and balance in the cosmos, and there were no crimes committed. This wasn't something that came through yet. The turn of events happens when Mother Earth realizes that Cronus isn't helping to liberate the rest of her sons, and she decides that the next child is going to be the one to depose Cronus, and he knows this. Every time he gives his wife, Rhea, a child, he picks it up and swallows it. And Rhea was not happy about this after all of her friends having Titan children running around. And this was the 5th time she had a child, and this was Zeus. And she devised a plan with Gaia to create a diversion. And so they give Saturn a rock that's covered in baby cloth, and he swallows the rock. Meanwhile, Zeus is born in a cave with earth sprites clattering around, making lots of noise so that they won't be discovered. And Zeus in Greek mythology is actually Jupiter in Roman mythology. So when we see that Jupiter is expansion, it's kind of the newest era of this divine masculine presence that's in the cosmos. The next turn of events happens when Metis turns to Cronus and tricks him into eating a magical herb to make him unconquerable. And instead, it made him sick enough to vomit up all of the other children. And this was the god Hades, Poseidon, the goddess Hestia, Demeter, and Hera. And they all joined forces with Zeus, and they finally took down Cronus, who had locked up these beings in Tartarus, and Zeus frees them and they join the battle. Of course, he just ends up sending them back, the Titans back into Tartarus. And one of them was Atlas, who was forced to go to the end of the world and carry the vault of the sky on his shoulders. Well, after these epic battles were over, the Cyclops, which were also Masons, built this beautiful palace for the gods in Olympus, and Zeus could rule all of the Titans and all of the people of the earth in peace. Of course, he was a philandering god, and he took Hera as his wife, who was very jealous, but he ended up kind of running around with other women from planet Earth and trying to bring the divine energy into Greece. So let's go back to this idea of rebirthing. And it's felt like recently, these last 6 months, I've met so many people were going through a difficult transformation and transition in life. And the idea that we are and have been rebirthing ourselves, and we've been going through this deeper process to become who we are and who we want to be on the outside, and the manifestations and the dreams that we have just being actualized in who we're really showing up as. And what's interesting to me is the thread of birth, and we talked about this in the last episode about Osiris and Isis and the story of his death and rebirth, and how eventually, ultimately, he had to go back into the underworld because he had become the king of the underworld. But this process of rebirth is something that has been deep in the psyche of consciousness through psychedelics, through mythology, that through depth psychology, that we have to undergo this process of basically being taken apart and put back together in order to become the highest vibration and frequency and versions of ourselves that we can possibly be. So with the Saturn being a 29-year cycle, they say your Saturn return happens when you're about 28 or 29, depending on what part of the cycle you were born in. And you are just going through this entire process through the 29 years of remaking yourself. Saturn governs restrictions, often chronos, is time. The fact that time isn't really an element, but it is a sense of restriction, that we only have so much time here. And we're reminded of that during our first Saturn return, when maybe perhaps we're partying and we're having so much fun and we realize that we need to grow up. And it's a sobering reality. I believe you have your Saturn return when you're out of high school, but you're still in a process of not quite being an adult yet. And yeah, for me, my Saturn return definitely represented moving into the highest expression of my career and the highest expression of who I'm going to have around me, leaving this really toxic relationship, and also leaving just the idea of being employed and working underneath somebody else's watch and in somebody else's energy, that I needed to be the creator of my own life and I needed to step into that autonomy. And for me, my Saturn's in Sagittarius, so it kind of represents that freedom on some level of my own intellectual power, my own beliefs. And with Saturn in Pisces, we were definitely moving into this endings, this release of the old, or maybe the old dream. Maybe it was this idea that we wanted to be young forever and we wanted to just be in a delusion, and we had to close the doors to that delusion and move into the reality that we're choosing, actively stepping into, which is Aries. Aries is the child in astrology. And so the fact that Saturn is eating his children is just really replicates this transition that we're moving through, where there can be a huge resistance to your spiritual growth, change, up leveling, your rebirth, and really claiming that. How are you claiming this new timeline and this new version of yourself? And how are you trying to just stuff it back down and return to the era of Pisces, where, you know, we're just wandering around the dreamy oceans of Poseidon and we're not actually taking any action and initiating any major change? And so I think that brings me to the next story that I want to share. And this story is about Poseidon. And Poseidon got into these moods. And as he got into these moods, he would raise his staff and start a storm or stir up the ocean. And this one time, he raised out of the sea this little island called Delos. And this was such a beautiful island, but there was nothing growing on it yet. It wasn't quite anchored into the ocean floor. It was just a floating mass of land. And this ended up being the site for the birth of Apollo and Artemis, because Zeus was philandering and he married a goddess, Leto. I guess she was a goddess. I guess she was immortal. And Hera was livid that he had married a woman and was going to have twins with her. And so this was literally the only place on Earth that Leto could take shelter. And she took shelter on the island of Delos and sat under a palm tree waiting to give birth. However, there is a goddess of childbirth named Elithia, and this island was forbade to go and birth these children because Hera didn't approve. And so at some point, all the goddesses pooled their resources together to make a beautiful necklace, for Hera. And it was 9 yards long with gold and amber. And she couldn't resist the necklace and was allowed to let this issue go and let Alethea birth. And Alethea was whisked down the rainbow from Iris to Leto to give birth to Artemis and Apollo. And Artemis is the goddess of the moon. She had this dark hair, and she was also the goddess of the hunt and the newborns. And she was given by Zeus a gift of a quiver of arrows and a silver bow, and her arrows were soft like moonbeams, and they promoted this painless death. And Apollo was given this hard as stone, piercing as rays of the sun arrows and the silver bow. And so this island actually was blessed after the birth by Zeus, fastened into the bottom of the sea, and there were flowers and beauty coming into the earth in this space. And so, much like the story about Saturn pushing the children back into his body and swallowing them, there is a sense of the childbirth being pinched off or pushed back, like, no, it's not time yet, we're not ready yet. The energy of Saturn through Hera, this restriction on moving forward on things. If maybe you feel this in your life right now, maybe you feel like something just isn't quite lining up to move forward and it's just not quite ready yet. So having patience. And I just got the opportunity to look at this beautiful piece of property, and the property is a site for workshops and events, and it's this beautiful yurt space. And it's a really massive property actually in the totality of it. So just beautiful nature sanctuary. And the feeling that I got was about trusting the process and trusting nature. This woman is really beautiful. Every time that she does anything, she talks to the land. She asks the land for permission. She asks the land where something wants to go, if something will be a good idea. And she said that there was a lake, and she said, this is the site for the lake. I know that the lake is going to be here. The land told me. And she had to ask somebody who is good with the excavator to dig for her. And he was like, no, I don't know why you want to put a lake here. This is crazy. Just like, what is this? She's like, just dig a hole. And sure enough, there was water in that hole, and it's a beautiful site for the lake. So this is actually the first workshop that is planned at this location that I'm facilitating with my dear friend Sunny. Is going to be about trusting nature, and it's a nature constellation. And so I just find it so interesting how these things align, where here I am on this land and I'm talking to this woman about the ability to trust nature, to take things slowly, to feel into it through our communication with the land, through the communication with our bodies. And then this beautiful gust of wind comes in and says, yes, my child, I hear you. You are trusting your process, and I'm trusting my process of finding my way into this new property, and things are starting to come together, but they aren't always, it's not easy and fast. It's just a deep, beautiful evolution. And so while things feel like they're changing, there's so much change in the air, and there's so many different planets that are outer planets that are moving. I feel like I need to podcast like often about this, because there's one coming up on June 9th. Jupiter, which spends about a year in each sign, is going to be moving into Cancer from Gemini. And so however that rings true for you, wherever that is in your world, actually it's a really lovely place for Jupiter to be in Cancer. It feels like this masculine and feminine balancing, like just Zeus moving into this place and blessing these two beautiful newborn twins and blessing the mother, blessing the expansion of childbirth, the growth, which is such a contrast to the energy of having to swallow all of your children. And yeah, did I mention that he took an herb and he vomited all these children out? And that's how, yeah. So Saturn is restrictive, and Saturn destroys parts of the sacred kingdom, and Zeus or Jupiter is the expander that's like, actually, I want to sleep with a bunch of women and bring more of this magic into our kingdom. It's an interesting thing to feel into, where you may feel restricted, and it's going to change for you based on your own personal chart, whether you have your rising sign in, it's going to align with you. So if your rising sign is Aries, then Saturn is going to be moving into your first house, and the expansion is going to be of yourself and your sense of self. You might shift how you look, or you might even be resistant to the shifting of your own physical body and your structure. So that is the journey and the adventure that we're on as we move into this new era. Yeah, it feels trite, honestly, to say like, oh, now things are different. I feel it. I feel that we are shifting, and it might be frustrating and it might be slow, but you know, with Neptune being in Aries as well, they both are meeting up now. Before this, they were both in Pisces. So we were kind of deeply purging in those areas of our life. And now we're ready to kind of expand more in those areas of our life. And with Neptune, we're actually opening up possibilities that we may have only dreamed about. So for the purposes of manifestation and dropping into what you really want to bring into in this life, this has been a really powerful time to just drop into that new energy and keep on dreaming. You know, the fun thing is to plan a trip, even if you're not going, to plan to build a house, to buy property, even though you maybe have no idea how it's going to happen. Like, I don't know how I'm going to end up purchasing property, getting a land trust, being part of some just slice of this beautiful planet Earth that wants to be held, that wants to be tended to, but it is happening. So being gentle and kind with yourself as you move through these changes, and there's always going to be more letting go. There may be more on the horizon for you to let go of, but just tending to this new energy as if it's a new child that's coming into your awareness now, and you can hold it and you can nourish it. Thank you for tuning in to the Liminal Frequencies podcast. It really means the world to me to have you in my sphere. Please remember to leave a 5-star review and share it with a friend that you would like to have in our community as we move into this new era of abundance and light. Bye now.